He walked into the station that day like anyone else, calm, respectful, and unaware of the storm about to unfold. To him, it was just another stop on his way home. But to them? He was nothing more than a target. They didn't ask questions. They didn't wait. It started as just another morning, a day like so many before. Marcus had built his life on discipline and dedication. Years of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices had earned him respect in his field, though few outside his circle knew just how far he had come. He carried himself with quiet strength, the kind of presence that didn't need words to command attention. To his neighbors, he was simply the man who waved politely on his way to work. To his colleagues, he was the one who never backed down from responsibility. That morning, Marcus had planned a quick stop at the local police station. Nothing unusual, nothing that should have raised suspicion. Just paperwork, routine, forgettable, almost boring. He wasn't dressed like a suspect. He wasn't acting like one. But in a world where perception can be twisted by prejudice, none of that mattered. The station smelled of old coffee and cold authority, its walls lined with photos of men in uniform. As Marcus walked in, he didn't know eyes were already following him, sizing him up, whispering unspoken judgments. To them, he wasn't a professional, a neighbor, or a leader. He was just another black man who didn't belong. There was a tension in the air he couldn't quite place, like a storm building in the distance. A conversation cut short as he passed. A pair of officers exchanging looks that carried more weight than words. He felt it but brushed it off. After all, he had nothing to hide. Marcus handed over his paperwork at the front desk, expecting nothing more than a signature and a polite nod. But instead of a simple transaction, he was met with suspicion. The officer behind the desk studied him longer than necessary, eyes narrowing, lips tightening into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Wait here," the officer muttered, disappearing into the back. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, sensing something off. The station, once just another building, now felt like a cage. Minutes dragged. When the officer returned, two more trailed behind him. Their stares weren't professional. They were accusatory. "Step over here," one of them ordered. No explanation. No courtesy. Just authority, sharp and cold. Marcus frowned but complied, keeping his voice calm. "Is there a problem?" They didn't answer. Instead, they circled him like he was prey, one officer blocking the door, another leaning in close enough that Marcus could smell the stale coffee on his breath. Then came the question. They demanded his ID, his explanation, even the reason for his clothes. Every answer he gave seemed to fuel their disbelief, their smirks growing as if waiting for him to trip over his own words. Then, without warning, one of them snapped. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Marcus tried to speak, but his voice cracked under the weight of humiliation. "I've done nothing wrong." "Save it," an officer spat. "We know your type." The words cut deeper than the cuffs. His type. As if years of service, hard work, and leadership meant nothing against the single fact of who he was. Dragged through the station, Marcus felt the burn of every eye on him. The harder he tried to hold his head high, the more they pushed him down, one hand gripping his shoulder with unnecessary force. The worst part wasn't the physical they shoved him into a holding room, the heavy door slamming shut like a final judgment. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a cruel reminder that this wasn't a nightmare, this was reality. Marcus's mind raced. Should he call someone? Demand a lawyer? Reveal who he really was? The urge was strong, but he hesitated. Part of him wanted to wait, wanted them to bury themselves. The doors swung open, and the officers stepped in, still smug, still convinced they held all the power. Marcus stood tall, his hands still restrained, but his mind was calm in a way that made the room feel smaller, heavier, almost suffocating for them. "Enough," he said, his voice steady but carrying an authority that made every head turn. For the first time, the laughter, the room fell silent. Words failed them. Every insult, every shove, every second of humiliation they had inflicted came crashing back on them like a wave they couldn't escape. The power they had wielded so carelessly moments ago dissolved instantly, leaving only stunned faces and the weight of their own prejudice. For Marcus, it wasn't revenge. It was a moment of justice, the undeniable truth asserting itself in a place where assumptions had ruled for too long. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence, his authority, his very existence in that space said more than any argument ever could. Marcus finally left the station, not in defeat, but with a quiet authority that radiated from every step he took. The officers he had faced moments ago were still reeling, grappling with the shock of realizing their assumptions had been completely wrong. What they had thought was control, their power to intimidate and humiliate, had dissolved the instant truth revealed itself. Walking out into the sunlight, he felt the weight of what had happened, but also a strange lightness. He had endured, he had survived, and in doing so, he had exposed a reality that needed to be seen. The humiliation, the fear, the near hopelessness, it had all been real. But so was his strength, his resilience, and the undeniable truth that no person's identity should ever be dismissed or devalued. This story isn't just what Marcus's experience shows is that courage and truth can turn the tables. That standing firm, even when powerless by appearances, can demand recognition and respect. But it also leaves a question hanging in the air: how many people endure moments like this every day, unseen, unheard, and unacknowledged? Marcus's day in the station ended, but the lesson lingers. Prejudice can be confronted,